Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Queer at Age podcast. I am joined today by the wonderful Cat Brogan, and Cat is an educator and host, poet, producer, project manager, and co-founder of Omagh Pride. And that's just under the letter P, all of those things. She is so much more. But thank you for joining us today, Cat, to give us a wee overview of some of the things you've been involved with.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here and wonderful project and delighted to be involved.
Excellent. So, Kat, you're not from the big city. You're a country girl. You grew up in the sticks. Are we allowed to say that?
Sure, why not?
And can you describe for us what it was like growing up in a rural area?
So I'm from a small village called Colourful outside Omagh, and I was born in 1985. So I guess when I was like a young teenager, the internet was kind of only just coming in. So there wasn't really a lot of, and the internet was really boring back then, by the way. We were being like, oh, the internet, and thinking it was going to be super interesting. And it was just like text on a white background.
Yeah.
So it was definitely like the early days of being able to connect with the outside world, I guess, and of being able to find information about, what might be things that I was interested in. And I guess in terms of my queerness, like I remember being really, really interested in Ally McBeal. I don't know if any other young lesbians remember the little lesbian subplots that happened in Ally McBeal, and lots of hot women, I guess, as well. And also, Ellen Ellen was about. And I think it's important to remember at that time, like Ellen had the first lesbian kiss on TV, I think in the mid 90s. And then she lost her career for 10 years. Like it really wasn't something that helped her in any way.
Yeah, it was a big.
So I remember like Tattoo was number one. These like Russians with the chainmetal feds kissing in the rain. That was on top of the pops. And I remember being like, ooh, I'm really interested in this, and I'm not sure why. And so there were the sort of bits of queerness were all very scant, and only sort of got to you through that sort of popular culture moments. And I guess being like a geriatric millennial, it's that interesting hinge, where you remember what it was like before connectivity was at your fingertips, but at the same time, um, you were still sort of you still have access to that like in your later teens. And I remember going to America on the Ulster American Project, which was where they sort of sent the poor Catholics and Protestants of Northern Ireland to America, the land of peace and love where everyone has harmony, in order to be friends with people who lived in the same town as you, but you somehow had to go all the way to America for it. And I remember there, I had, a friend who he painted his nails and he was bisexual. And I remember having this really intense friendship with a woman there. I was like 14, 15. And I remember it being so intense and us being so sad when we had to leave each other. And, we both ended up being queer, obviously. So there was sort of little tidbits of signs and things, and it was something where I really did, like, I had crushes on my friends and stuff, but it was all very like not it was something that I knew I was interested in, but I very much kind of suppressed and didn't have any role models. It wasn't something that seemed like a possibility. It seemed like really difficult, and I should just kind of like squish that down and like get a boyfriend. And I think also being someone who's quite like femme presenting, the images that I saw of lesbians didn't seem like me. I didn't,
Right.
I wasn't interested in like having short hair and hiking boots and whatever other stereotypes. Of course, it's very different now, thankfully. Like there's so many there's no such thing as what a lesbian looks like. But I think at that time, because there was so little access to information and ideas and possibility models, that it just, my teenage years, it was like, oh, okay, I know I fancy my friends, but that's not anything I can do anything about, and I'm better off just getting a boyfriend because that'll make me cool. I think I was already a very odd person that adding queer on top of that oddness just seemed like too much,
It wasn't going to allow you to fit in.
Exactly. I was definitely somebody who, I was loud, I was extroverted, I talked a lot. I was writing poetry then, and in primary school my teachers would get me to perform my poems. I did the fesh. I was into public speaking. So I used to read in mass. So like anywhere there was a microphone and a stage and an opportunity to perform, I was there. I was
Brilliant.
absolutely gutted that I couldn't sing or dance because those were the main outlets for performers in
Yeah.
Oma. And a lot of my friends were in the choir, and then the bomb happened when I was 13, which was obviously a really big impact. It was 1998, and that had such a massive impact on my hometown, being such a small place. And then there was so much attention on my hometown in this really weird way that had never happened before. Um, and like my friends were in the choir and they got to go to America and all this, and I was so gutted that I couldn't sing because I just really wanted to perform and be on stage, but I couldn't sing or dance, so I had to just talk instead.
Here. But back then, Kat, you mentioned seeing things like on Top of the Pops, and there were very sparse moments of that. But in a way, did that make them a wee bit more important because they weren't everywhere?
For sure, like I can still really strongly remember those moments in my teenage life whenever I saw little glimmers of lesbianism. And I think that's the thing too about it at that time, was that it was very much like, oh, this is something saucy for men. And I think that that's something that kind of put me even more back in my hetero performing box, was that it was like, well, I'm not interested in turning men on. So if being a lesbian means you're turning men on, then that's definitely something I don't want to be.
Yeah.
So I think that that's something really, especially about like the late 90s, early 2000s, it was very much like, ooh, lesbians. And it was like, you're a subject of porn, for the male gaze. And that was really problematic, I think, as a young queer person growing up at that time. And it was a very different time, I think, in terms of like consent, and in terms of like female, woman being objectified. I think as young women we didn't really have like, and as girls, not even women, we didn't have like a language or an operational way of dealing with unwanted male attention. You know, that I got as someone with like boobs and hair. Like so yeah, so I think it was an interesting time, like to be growing up. And I think even though it's like it's 20 years ago now, which is long and short at the same time, I think it was we definitely didn't have like the same knowledge and like ways of navigating sexuality and gender.
And so was there a coming out for you at some point?
So I when I went to university at 18 over in York, I thought, okay, this is my moment. I can like finally because I'd had boyfriends and everything, but it was always very much like they'd really pursued me and like written me a poem or given me a mixtape, or really done pulled out all the stops, and I was like, oh, all right then. Um Although I wasn't very interested in the physical part. And then when I got to university, I thought, okay, this is my moment. I can reinvent myself. And I went to the LGBT society, and there was like four people there in this massive hall. And there was like, one sort of super butchy looking woman, and like that was it. And I was like, oh my God, this is like not cool in any way. I feel like now there's a certain coolness about being queer that definitely did not exist in 2003. And
Had the
and I,
inventor.
and I was in York, which was like a small university, a small city. It's not even really a city, it's more of a town. And I was already again like super loud. It was very Southern English, so my accent was really strong. No one could understand me. They would kind of mock and laugh at me. Um, so I already felt like really, really othered at York University. Like I was Irish cat, like Irish was as exotic as it got. And thankfully, I found all the other weirdos and that was grand. But once again, like being gay just felt like another othering. And I already felt so othered. I was like, I don't want to like be ghettoized further into this group of like four people. So again, I went and got back in my hetero performing box, and I had some wonderful boyfriends in university, and but again, it was really like, one of them was like we were really good friends, and then it sort of happened, and we used to write together, and we'd put on events, and he's actually at the moment getting loads of radio play on BBC Radio 6 Music. He's a rapper and all that. He's 40-year-old. We're almost 40, and he's so it was very much like my relationships were with people who really, there was a collaborative project element. There was a creative like joy and collaboration going on. But then I ended up like, you're male and I'm female, so I guess after a while we should get together. But all this while I was like, I know I want to be with women, but I keep defaulting to men. And then when I was like the year after I graduated, I was like, okay, I need to leave York. I need to leave my boyfriend. I want to be with women. I can't just keep putting this like to the back of my mind. Like it's actually not fair on these very lovely men that I love very much and I still love and I'm still in touch with, still friends with them. But I still know that there's that I want to be a woman. So this is maybe like 2007 at this stage. And then I went back to Northern Ireland. I was living in Belfast. Then the credit crunch happened. And it was like a really difficult time to be 22, because
Yep.
you're just finding like your first jobs and you're getting your CV up and then suddenly there's no jobs. Suddenly like Northern Ireland was like awful at that moment. And I was like trying to go, like I went to the Kremlin. I remember having a super awkward moment in the Kremlin, and I think like my sister came with me, and like somebody hitting my sister, and I was like, oh.
Yep.
And I remember going on Gumtree. Gumtree used to have this thing that it was like girls seeking girls, and I had this like super awkward date with this woman. Then she started talking about following Guns N' Roses around the country, and I was like, this ain't gonna work, love.
Wow.
So it was just like a series of me trying to like just failing to be a lesbian, just deep lesbian failure. And then in the end I was like, you know what, like Belfast is not kicking it, like I need to go to London.
If you're enjoying this episode, you might want to subscribe to the Queer at Age series as we release new episodes monthly. If you'd like to make a donation towards our work, just visit www.hereandI.org and click the donate button.
So I went and I was a nanny in London, looking after 3 kids in Broccoli when Broccoli was not cool. And now Broccoli is very cool, but in 2008 it was not cool. And I like, again, I was doing my poetry a lot more. So the good thing about being in Belfast was I won the Belfast Poetry Cup. I did my first ever poet in a school stuff through like Cathedral Arts Quarter early days, and all that. So I sort of had a nice little poetry CV, and I started doing poems about like how I wanted to be with women, but then it was really hard to be with women. And then how does anybody know that I'm a lesbian if I'm not lesbian presenting? Um, and then, I was doing poetry stuff, and I was nannying, and I was doing internships, and just kind of in London, and having just again a series of unfortunate internet
Okay.
hookups. It's a lot harder for women, okay? I feel like gay men are just like, okay, see you in half an hour. But with gay women, it's much more like, okay, so um and then eventually I told my dad, actually told my dad on the phone, and he was really good about it. He was like, "Do you think maybe you need to talk to someone so you can come out more?" Which was beautiful. And my mom took a bit longer. She found it hard. She's like super Catholic and mass every day and mass on the internet, and but
And what age were you
eventually
then? What age were you then, Kat, when you came out to your dad?
I would have been like 24 when I came out to my dad. Yeah, about that. By that point I was like, I think there was something he said on the phone about like getting married or something or other, and I was like, you know what, Dad, I'm gay. I want to be with a woman. Um, so that was really liberating, because at that point it was like I'd had liaisons, shall we say, but I hadn't had a girlfriend. And I feel like that's a really hard part in a queer person's life, when you're like, I know what I want. I just don't seem to be able to meet somebody. And like, how do I let people know what my sexuality is if I'm not in a relationship?
Yeah.
Because that's how it comes up. You're like, oh, here's Susie, my girlfriend. And then everyone knows what it is, rather than like, yeah, well, I know that I'm attracted to women and I think about women. That's like a more awkward personal conversation that people don't generally have. So I think that was something I find really difficult, was like, what comes first, and that's something I wrote about a lot. And definitely performing helped, because then I could get up on stage and like perform a poem about unrequited lesbian love, and then at least people would know that I was a lesbian. So that
Yes.
would get that bit out of the way. And a lot of my friends and everything, they found out that I was gay. They'd known me from university when I'd been with men, and then they would find out I was gay because they'd come to see me do poetry.
Right.
And even with like my best friend, I found it really hard to tell her, because it felt like, was I lying to people before? Was I being inauthentic up until that point? And I actually told a friend of mine who was sleeping with my best friend, because I knew he would tell her. Then he told her, that was that sorted. So even though like I'm a massive oversharer, I found that really difficult, because it felt like, um, how did I go from being that person who had relationships to men with men to being like, no, this isn't, I am interested in women, and I'm not going to default to heterosexuality any longer.
Yep.
And I think also that, because we live in a society, certainly then, where like men make a move. So if there's a moment when you're feeling sad, or you're feeling lonely, or it feels like everybody else is coupled up, like it's never going to happen, and then a man makes a move, it's much easier to just like respond to the move. Whereas then whenever you're like, no, that's not what I want, then as a woman, you have to then learn how to make a move. And if you've never done that, like I have friends now who are in their 40s who are trying to come to terms with that. Like, how do I act on on my desires whenever I don't know how to hit on a woman? And
That's
then
really interesting. Yes,
I
that's a
think
good point.
because as women we've had experience of unwanted male attention, um, we never want to make a woman feel the way a man made us feel whenever they hit on us.
Yeah. So
Right?
you
So
have to
then how do
consider
you
that.
do that? It's like, it's so hard. It is so, so hard.
Yep.
And then when you are like, there's just even the apps and stuff like that. Like, you know, you could, I remember back then you could set Tinder to like 200 miles and you'd finish it in like four swipes. Like it was, there was that little going on. And even in London at that time, like I went to this, there was this lovely cafe called First Out, and I started running like a LGBT poetry event there. I took over from someone, it was called Insight, and someone was running it. I took it over, and then when I left London, I passed it on to another poet, and then she's passed it on to another poet. So it's still going, which is great. Still run by a queer woman. And but that venue closed like after 25 years in Tottenham Court Road. First Out closed, and it was an awesome like cafe. You know, it wasn't necessarily like a big dirty club like. And I remember there being there was one lesbian bar, and it was like literally the size of this room. Like it was the tiniest bar you've ever seen. Or there was like the lesbian room of heaven, which is about twice the size of this room. But again, like I would just have had some dodgy experiences, some dodgy times. You're just like, okay. And then I think once you've had some dodgy experiences, then you're like, oh, okay, how do I put myself out there again? You know, how do I say,
Yeah.
okay, let's do this again?
Yeah, I've had this conversation with loads of people in our community, and they have said that they remember back, well, how did straight people do it? And they remember every disco, every wedding disco, every generic disco had the slow section where they would play three slow songs, and then you'd have your fast songs after that, the rave, they would rave it up at the end. But those three slow songs were when you asked someone to dance. And our community, I feel, has never had that. It's always been like heavy dancing, heavy rave, and that's something that has been missing from our community. That would have been really handy to be able to
Definitely.
just ask someone for a slow dance. It might have might have helped, Kat.
For sure.
So that was in London, and there still even wasn't a massive lesbian scene,
Yeah, I find it really difficult. It was, and then it's hard because you're like, oh, but I'm in London now. Like, I'm not in York anymore. I'm not in Belfast anymore. Why is this so difficult? And I think also it was still like kind of pre internet dating being really big. Like I felt towards the end of my time in London, internet, you know, it got a lot more, you know, Tinder came in and all that kind of stuff. But at that stage, it was still very much like meeting people on the internet was very kind of niche activity, you know. And I mean, I think the straights should really thank the gays for making internet dating mainstream and acceptable, you know.
yeah.
Because you know what would they do without it now? And really, it's you know, it's the queers who kind of got it going. So yeah, so then I was squatting. I was living in squats in London. That's how I was managing to you know, do my poetry thing. And I met there was somebody who I set up a squat with, and then we ended up getting together. Um and it didn't last very long. I think, to be honest, there was, I mean, maybe her being with me was kind of a bit like whenever I was with guys, where we had sort of really bonded over setting up this squat together, and we wanted it to be really female focused, and we were doing a lot of activism around the housing crisis, around gentrification. This was like 2011. And then I got really involved in the Occupy movement with Occupy London,
Right.
and was doing a lot of media spoke stuff for that. I just won the BBC Edinburgh Fringe Poetry Slam, so a lot of the my poetry stuff was kind of kicking off, and and then and then I felt like we needed to spend we weren't getting a chance to sort of like spend time together, or like, you know, actually just do normal couple stuff. Like maybe it was all too rushy. And I was like, let's go on holiday together. And then I had to go back for a gig, and she decided to stay in Europe and go see her ex-boyfriend, and like, you know, cheat on me with her ex-boyfriend. So, and then dump me as I was going out the door for the railing sale back to Ireland for Christmas.
Oh,
So that was lovely, and there's nothing like crying in the bike carriage of the of the train on like the 23rd of December with all the hungover Irish people who weren't organized enough to get a plane ticket back to Ireland. So that was tricky, and that was my big heartbreak. And then I rebounded into getting with this girl who was completely inappropriate on so many levels, who was a very damaged individual, and I tried to make it work for a long time. And I think sometimes that's the thing too, that because um maybe especially at that time, like coming to your queerness like later in life. At this point I was maybe what, my late 20s or something. When you do find someone, you sort of think, I have to hang on to this person because maybe I'm not going to find somebody else, or
yeah.
um maybe this is as good as it gets, or um and I guess maybe I'm a fixer as well. But I was like, okay, I can, if I do this and I do that, then the relationship will be better.
Yeah. There's a lot of that in
Um
our community.
when actually, and in the end up, what made me finally call it quits was that I was doing my master's. I got offered to do this like first in the world program where they put poets into schools, and we were doing a master's at Goldsmiths, and I needed to finish my dissertation. And I was like, if I stay with this woman, I am not going to be able to do my dissertation. So I we were living together in a boat, which was fun.
Oh,
And in a boat, yeah. So I said to her, look, you've got 6 weeks to sort yourself out. And I'm going to Ireland and finish my dissertation. Don't be here when I get back. That was, and lucky I also had my sister and my best friend like did a sort of pincer move on me, and were like, you need to break up with this person. You cannot come, and my friend was like, come and live in my house. Don't let her come here. Whatever you need to do to just get away from this situation, like, we're here for you. And I think that was so important to have that kind of intervention moment
yeah.
to get me out of that situation. And I think that that's something also that is really difficult in queer relationships. Again, like with two women, like, there was like some violence involved, and it's very, that's as interesting kind of, it's a different, you know, how do you deal with that? Like, it's very,
Yes, it's
I mean,
rarely
I think,
spoken about.
yeah, I think domestic violence isn't among same-sex couples is something that, you know, and also, domestic violence that men experience at the hands of women too. Like, that's also a thing, right?
Yep. Very taboo.
Yeah, and I feel like it's something, that we need to maybe be more open about, or try and figure out more skills for talking about and dealing with it. Because there is that whole sort of thing like, oh, if someone hit me, I'm away, and it's like, well, it's not always that simple,
Yeah.
and I think that's definitely what that relationship taught me was like, you think you know what you would do in that situation until you're in that situation, and it's only then that you know what you would actually do. So definitely
Yep.
taught me to like not be like so judgy and stuff.
Because this episode was so long, we are releasing it in two parts. So subscribe to be alerted when part two is uploaded.